You're listening to SaskScapes, a podcast featuring the stories of arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan. The Saskatchewan Festival of Words has established itself as one of the most loved literary festivals in Canada. Now entering its 19th year, the festival hosts some of Saskatchewan's and Canada's finest writers. I'm Kevin Power, and I'm thrilled to kick off the first episode of 2015 in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, with my first two guests, Donna Lee Howes and Sarah Simison, who are at the helm of this festival each year, putting it all together. In the second half of this episode, I'm joined by Saskatchewan author Anthony Bidulka. Anthony is best known for his long-running, award-winning mystery series featuring Russell Quant, and his fast-paced thriller series featuring disaster recovery agent Adam Saint. Enjoy the podcast. Even though the Saskatchewan Festival of Words is not currently happening, I have with me the two people that make it happen and who are currently fast and furiously in the midst of putting it all together for 2015. I have with me Donna Lee Howes. Shall I refer to you as the president of the organization or the executive director?
I'm the executive director.
Right. Because you have a board, and you probably have a president of your board.
We do. The
right.
Chairman, yes. Patrick Hall.
Okay. And also I have with me Sarah Simison. And Sarah, your official title?
I'm the operations coordinator.
Right. So you're also looking after all things communications as well?
Trying to keep up, yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay, good. So I found this rather amusing. On the homepage of your website, it says that the Festival of Words should not exist. And while I would argue the point now that we've moved beyond a hockey and bingo loving province, we are such a culturally rich province. I think probably in 1996 when the festival formed, nobody thought that it would become what it is today, and so to that end, it ought not to exist in an unlikely province like Saskatchewan. Yeah,
that's true. Moose Jaw is the perfect setting for a literary festival like this. Although it's a small-sized city, I think we've approached 35,000 now. It's the ideal spot because all the venues that the festival uses, the hotels, and most of the attractions are all downtown and within walking distance. So our audiences come and frequently arrive on Thursday and don't have to go back to their cars to leave town until Sunday.
Right. And I love this town. I work in this town often, and it's just every time I come back, there is so much happening in Moose Jaw. So to me, it seems like a very likely place to hold a festival like this.
We get that a lot too. You know, people think, well, it's happening in Moose Jaw, it can't be that big. Or anytime we travel around for conferences or anything, people say, so where are you based out of, Regina or Saskatoon?
Right.
People can't believe that Moose Jaw has a festival like this, so it's great.
People owe it to themselves to come to Moose Jaw, especially in the summertime, because you can't hit a week where there isn't something significant happening. Let's go back to 1996. Gary Highland was the founding director. Were you involved, Donna, at that time?
No, I wasn't. I started to attend the festival in 2005. And I was living in British Columbia at the time, although I'm a Moose Jaw girl, born and raised here. Right. But I was living in BC, and I started coming back to take part in what was going on at that time as an audience member, and then eventually became the person who handled their fundraising raffle every year during the festival. And then as Gary grew ill, Gary Highland, the festival founder, grew ill, he contacted me at the Coast and asked me if I would seriously consider working with the Festival of Words as an executive director.
Right. But you probably have heard stories. What was it like when it first launched? Pretty sparse, pretty quiet?
I think that the earlier audiences were made up primarily of retired teachers and teacher librarians and Misjavians who were supportive of the idea of having a literary festival here in the city. But since that time, it's grown, and it includes people who are inviting their sisters-in-law and their daughters-in-law. So one time, I think we had 4 generations sitting at the same table at the Sunday farewell luncheon. So in the earlier days, I think the venues were smaller. Mm-hmm. The audiences may have been smaller, but a lot of enthusiasm in Moose Jaw. We have a fantastic public library, which has a tremendous amount of community support and a large circulation, for its size. And so I think that's played a large role in making Moose Jaw the ideal spot to have a festival of words.
Right. So you first came here as a participant. Do you have a background, a literary background?
No, although I'm a teacher, my background really, as it relates to the festival, is working in the media, but also in running provincial-wide arts festivals. So my background was in running a film festival in British Columbia.
All right. Right. And there is a film component to what you do as well, which we'll get to later. Sarah, what about you? You're from Moose Jaw originally?
No, I'm from Vernon, BC originally,
Oh.
but my partner's from Moose Jaw, so that's how I ended up here. And I have a background in banking, strangely enough, but my dad is a writer, and I grew up in the arts community. And when I saw the job posting, I was still working in banking. When I saw the job posting to work for the festival, I jumped at the chance to work for an arts organization, and it's my dream job. I can't imagine doing anything else now.
That's great.
Yeah.
Plus, I think it's also probably to the festival's credit that they have somebody with a bit of a financial background, because after all, the arts is a viable business opportunity.
Yes.
It is, right. So although this is the Saskatchewan Festival of Words, here we are in 2015, and dare I say, you hold your own against all of the other national festivals in this country, yes?
That's true, and we can claim it and be proud of it, but it's really the presenters and the authors who ask to be invited to our festivals who've established that standard and said, we wait for an invitation to come to Festival of Words before we even accept an invitation elsewhere, hoping that we might be able to come. And I think in large part that's because they get to sit in on each other's sessions while they're here. They have downtime to visit, and they love our audiences. Our audiences are well-read and ask good questions.
Right. So tell me a bit about the process of applying to be a part of the festival as an author. How does that work? How many applications will you receive in a year?
Hey, it's Kevin. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder that the SaskScapes podcast is available for free on your favorite podcast app, or you can stream it from your browser. Check out the show notes for the link. On the SaskScapes homepage, you'll notice something new under the logo called SaskScapes Plus. You can't miss it. There's a big button saying support with a heart icon next to it. I'd love it if you could click on that button and help keep this podcast series going. When SaskScapes launched in May 2014, it was the first podcast in the province celebrating arts, culture, and heritage. In fact, you'd have been pretty hard-pressed to find any Saskatchewan podcasts. So I'd like to think that we paved the way. It's been because of your support that this podcast is now in its 9th year. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Well, we have a program committee, so anything that comes in, we automatically send it to our program committee. To give you an idea of what they have to work with, they have a list of about 150 to 200 authors, right, and only about 20 to 25 of those are invited. So it's a really tough task to go through it, and of course, we can't invite everybody. We'd love to, but we can't. So it's hard. But we get applications from a number of different sources. So sometimes the authors contact us directly by email, by telephone, social media. Sometimes it's the publishers. So but we take every inquiry seriously. We don't feature self-published authors at this time, which is difficult. We have a lot of self-published authors asking to get involved, but at this point, it's just published authors.
And how are you deciding from this huge list? What's the decision process look like?
Well, there's a committee, so they start meeting in September every year, and they just work with that database of names, and they do research, and it's consensus by the committee. So they mull it all over during their meetings, and they come up with a decision. Usually, every meeting they decide on a few, and they also representation is important. So cross genre, we want as many genres represented as possible.
Right.
Award winners for that year, male, female, cultural diversity, sexual diversity, the more diverse, the better.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that includes too. We have a Saturday night concert during the festival, so we usually, so that involves music. We have dramatic readings, so theater. There's a theater component, and then we also have things like a spoken word slam competition during the festival, graphic novelists and things like that too.
So you have opened the doors to graphic novelists as well.
Absolutely, we've featured graphic novelists for about since 2009. Yeah. So, and we try to have at least one every year.
Right.
Yeah.
It occurs to me that you must really treasure the venues that you have. Has that been a challenge to find venues for all of these events?
No, it actually, until now, it hasn't been. A large number of our readings take place at the Moose Jaw Public Library. And although the rooms are small there, it means that the audiences are really physically up close and personal with the authors. And we use the Art Museum Theater there, too, because those buildings are adjacent, and they're in Crescent Park. So they're in central Moose Jaw. We also come to the Moose Jaw Cultural Center and use the theater facility here, the Mee Wilson Theater. And now we've branched out, and we're using the Mosaic Conference Center.
All right. And authors do come back in subsequent years, maybe not immediately, but eventually we do see names return, yes?
That's true, and it's usually based on whether or not they have new work. Yes, new work usually, and audience requests. So we have a large number of evaluation forms, usually in the neighborhood of about 200 evaluation forms that we get from our audiences each year. And that's another source of authors is that our audiences suggest people that they'd like to see here, and sometimes we have to look them up and find out who it is.
Right. So let's throw around a few names. I know now all of a sudden your mind is reviewing over the last several years, but within Saskatchewan, you've got a lot of very impressive names. Yeah, Martel has been here. Jane Freeman has been here. Who else?
Alice Kuipers,
Bob Curry,
Dave Margocious, Dave Carpenter,
Alan Fartheringham was here.
Yes, he's
Who's
a
originally from
Saskatchewanite.
there,
Yes.
Harriet, and Jerry Hill.
That's right.
Right. And then on the national scale, you have people like Terry Follis, who's been here. Who else?
Let me see. Audrey Thomas has been here. Dion Brand, Lawrence Hill.
Margaret Atwood.
Has Margaret been here?
Margaret Atwood, she's been here.
Been in the building,
That's what everyone asks us.
Yeah, really. I was going to go there, but I wanted to avoid the obvious question.
Well, it's interesting because even the cab drivers who've never set foot perhaps in a cultural event and sort of say that with pride will say, when I tell them that I work for the festival, well, has Margaret Atwood been there, and they may never have read a page of her work, but they want to know whether she's attended in Moose Jaw. And so we're always pleased to say that she came. She enjoyed her time here. She came with Adrian Clarkson, and they had a wonderful time with their spouses here.
What a great duo together. Well, it's good to know that the majority of Canadians do, in fact, know who Margaret Atwood is, unlike some former mayors of former large cities who had never heard of her. She's a wonderful person and a great speaker.
That's the great thing about our festival. Donna Lee and I had a chance a couple years ago to attend some other festivals around Canada, and it was great going to them, but we realized at our festival is much more up close and personal. There's a number of sessions going on at any given time, so the rooms are quite small. There's a question and answer period. People always rave about, oh, I got to go for lunch with someone like Terry Fallis after one of his sessions because he was kind of wandering around town looking where to go, and people have coffee with these authors, and we have a trivia night where we auction the authors off as a fundraiser, so teams can buy authors to play trivia with them.
Wow.
And so they get to, eat some food and have a beer and hobnob with the writers at our festival. So that's the great thing about it, I think.
Oh, it's good to know that some of the superstar authors of this country are still very, very approachable and like to hang.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they do, and it's kind of interesting. We've had comments from authors who've said, your festival's really different. We've been to festivals, husband and wife teams who both write, have said, we've been to festivals all across Canada, and for the first evening, maybe there's a bit of posturing, but by the following morning, it's all about, my background is that I'm from a small town as well, and my family were farmers, and suddenly all the they shed those clothes, and they're suddenly all small town people talking about how their roots are similar to those of people in Moose Jaw.
Right.
And why it's a perfect fit.
Yeah, therein lies the typical characteristic of the average person living in this province, is that we're extremely approachable, and that we all have this common thread of growing up in these small towns. That's nice. So it's a big festival with still a small town sensibility to it that way, which is lovely. So tell me a little bit about the other aspects of what you're doing during the year. You're not just holding this festival in the summertime. You talked a little bit about film. You've got the Cineview film series. Do you want to speak to that, Sarah?
Yeah, the Cineview film series, we partner with Film Circuit through the Toronto International Film Festival. So it operates pretty much like a film society. We have an independent committee that chooses all the films that come through TIFF. Being a small town, Moose Jaw gets a lot of sort of the top action and cartoon and romantic flicks, so quite a few people in town wanted something deeper, I guess. So bringing independent and foreign film to Moose Jaw was the main goal of the committee. So we run about 8 films a year. We have a fall series and a winter series. And it's been quite popular. It's been running for 10 years at least.
So it's so fantastic that Moose Jaw has the vision, that you folks have the vision to be able to bring those films here so that people can see them, because they're tough to find. They're certainly not always being pushed out there on DVD and in Walmart stores like Blockbuster films. That's great. And they're held here at the Moose Jaw Cultural Center?
No, they actually take place at the Galaxy Theatre, which is up at the top of Main Street. So it's in a full-size, big-screen theatre.
Wow, excellent. And well-attended.
Very well-attended and growing every year.
And then you also have the Performers Cafe. Tell me a bit about that.
Performers Cafe is an open mic night that we hold at a restaurant right on Main Street. Mm-hmm. This year it's at Common. It used to be called Java. Right. And so it's an open mic event. So really it's an opportunity for, we usually have a literary artist and a musical guest, or a slam poet every month. And we published an entire year's schedule of who's going to appear and who the featured performers will be. But then the audience get up and participate as well. They just sign up with the MC, and we have regulars who come every week. And you watch people develop in their careers from being kind of tentative their first times up at the mic, and then getting encouragement from the audience, honing their skills a bit, somebody saying, step a little closer to the mic, or the audience yell, talk louder, we can't hear you, slow down, you're mumbling. And so people actually develop their skills as performers at the mic. And it's evolved over the years. Our audiences are growing, and sometimes you can't get a seat in the place, and our audiences are even seated on the stairs, all the way upstairs.
Wow. For listeners who aren't familiar with this phenomenon called the Poetry Slam, tell us a little bit about that, Sarah.
It's a spoken word competition.
Yeah.
We partner with Shayna Stock, who helps run Word Up in Regina, the Word Up program at Creative City Centre in Regina. So she's usually our producer for it. So there's a number of spoken word artists that come from across the prairies. So we usually have representation from Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, and try to have representation from, Moose Jaw, Saskatoon, and Regina. So the spoken word artists get on stage and they essentially compete to win the audience over. The judges are audience members and they have to rate them. And the highest scoring poet wins in the end. So there's usually some prize money available for them. And so, spoken word is a really important genre, I think, that for a long time was largely ignored. And it's exciting that the festival started with featuring their first spoken word artist in 2009. That was Patrick Swan. And every year they featured one after that. And now we're going into our third slam competition, I believe.
And it's because I've been to some where the poetry is written in real time.
It's not written in real time, but they have certain time limits that they have to be within. So it's usually memorized work that they have practiced ahead of time. Yeah.
Right. Is there a poetry slam component to the Performers Cafe during the year?
There is. Actually, we usually have members from the Regina Word Up program that come usually about 6 months out of our programming. One of the featured artists is a slam poet from Regina.
Right.
Sometimes Saskatoon, but usually Regina. So, I think there's a lot of representation there. And the other thing is, we run in conjunction with Sage Hill Writing in Saskatoon. We run a teen writing program. It's called the Teen Writing Experience during the festival. And we found a lot of those students since 2009 are becoming more and more interested in spoken word as an art form and a way to express themselves. So a lot of those same youth attend the Performers Cafe. It's a free event. It's an open mic night. They can get up there and talk about whatever they want to in front of an audience. So so it's been I would say there's been a big focus on spoken word at Performers Cafe and at the festival.
How does the festival affect the youth of Moose Jaw when it's happening during the summertime? They're not in school, but do you get the sense that it's having an impact on the literary sensibilities of students? Has the cool factor gone out of reading and writing? I think not. But is there a chance for the festival to somehow infiltrate the school system on any level during the year?
Well, certainly at the festival, we have several programs that are family geared, and the youngest age group there is the Storytime for Little Ones, which is for young people 4 and up. And so we have a nationally recognized storyteller who comes and has an event that is, because it's in July, schools may not be in session, but daycares are. And the Y have programs. And so those young people come with their parents and grandparents and take part in that. And then our Kids Inc. program, which could be creative work with an illustrator or with a writer or with an actor. That's Kids Inc., and that's for young people ages 8 to about 13. And then they go into the teen writing experience at age 14 and stay with us until we almost have to push them out the door at 18. They're reluctant to leave because they really enjoy it, and they form a group of peers that become fellow mentors, and they mentor each other, and they stay in touch on social media throughout the year. And so we have a number of programs that tie young people and families to the festival year round.
And there are workshops that happen during the festival as well, yeah?
Yeah, we run about 4 different workshops during the festival, not including the youth workshops that Donna just mentioned. We usually have one that's called the Great Big Book Club. So it's a book club style workshop with one of the authors attending the festival and a group of people discussing a book with the author. And then there's moderators to help keep it all under control. And then we run about 3 other workshops, and those can range from learning how to write poetry to learning how to make your own chapbook or graphic novelists. To journaling, so it all depends on, we ask our authors what they're willing to do, what special skills they have, and work from there. So sometimes, Terry Follis surprised us a few years ago, and it was all about learning how to use social media to promote your writing, and he did a workshop on that.
Wow.
So, authors are constantly surprising us with workshop ideas that we haven't even thought of. So it's quite diverse every year.
Within that workshop or any of the others or any of the open mic discussion groups with authors, has the whole topic of ebooks come up as Donna rolls her eyes? I mean, it's an undeniable part of our literary landscape in 2015. These do exist. But I'm willing to bet across the board all the authors that have been here don't get the sense that it's going to completely obliterate a hard copy book.
No, not from our point of view. I don't think, we were just looking at an author the other day with the program team whose most recent book release was ebook, and we've never invited an author before who has a brand new book that has only been released as an ebook. So we so that came up at a program meeting very recently, but we raffle off an e-reader every year at the festival.
Yeah. Oh,
so we do promote it. Yes, much to the chagrin of our local bookstore owner, we do it. But I know a few years ago, before I was here, I started in 2010, and I know that they actually had a panel discussion with some authors about ebooks. So I don't know, Donna Lee might have something to say about that.
Well, it's not quite the same taking your e-reader to the beach and laying there and just putting it face down in the sand, or, worrying about dropping it someplace or whatever. I think that for most of us, there's just something about holding a book, the smell of the ink, the feel of the paper,
cracking that binding.
Oh, exactly.
For the first time,
Physically taking it to bed with you, and it really is, between the covers, there is more than just pages there. And we're physically attracted to physical books, and it's somehow different.
Yeah, but it's worth noting that the ebook phenomenon and the ability to purchase books online now is having a profound effect on the bookstore, the actual brick and mortar bookstore. There's one closing in Saskatoon this month.
And publishing companies.
Yes.
We're watching publishing companies merge or go out of business, and it's undeniable that the electronic world is taking over, and it's something we talk about a lot. And and self-publishing falls into that same vein. A lot of people, it's easier just to submit a manuscript to self-publishing online and have it printed out for you. So I think the publishing world is changing. So we're just going to have to adapt as we go along. And I think the festival and its board, its employees, and its committees are quite good at staying on top of what's happening and what's changing and coming up with really great ideas on how to move along with it.
So is the ebook phenomenon and the fact that people can self-publish one of the deterrents to not having self-publishers here at the festival, just because it would overwhelm the system with choices?
Partly. We've talked about that before. The problem that we have found with self-publishing is lack of editing.
Right.
I don't want to paint all self-published authors with the same brush, because there is some great stuff out there, but 90% of the time when you open a self-published book, slaps you in the face. You can tell there's a lack of editing, and so because there's no editing process, we would need an independent committee, I think, to read every self-published book that has come in. On the other hand, we understand that self-publishing is probably not going away, and it's actually gaining popularity as far as we can tell. So, I don't think it's something that the festival can ignore forever. We're just going to have to come up with some creative ways on how we're going to do it. As the operations coordinator in the office, I'm the first point of contact for most of the people who contact our office, and I have been called out on by a number of people over the years about not accepting self-published authors. But that's another great thing about the Performers Cafe, at least for people who are able to take advantage of it. We always tell people, the festival is not accepting self-published authors at this time, but we do have a space for you to, we invite people, come on down, read part of your book, sell some of your books there if you want to,
You can, huh?
Absolutely, and we've had people do that before. So, it's a great place for them to meet other writers, and we've got some local writing groups in town, and it's been really good for artists to get together and collaborate and work together. So, so we do try to direct self-published authors there, but it's it's a slippery slope, I think.
Within the published authors in Saskatchewan, I've spoken to a few in this series. Why do you think this province is just littered with authors? It's a very prolific province.
It is, absolutely. I was born and raised in BC. My dad's an artist, and all my friends, and I was immersed in the artistic community where I'm from, and I thought BC was incredible. I thought it was so full of everything, and I went to theater all the time, and readings and music events, and the best theater I've ever seen, the best dramatic production I've ever seen was in Moose Jaw in Saskatchewan, and
it probably was that Christmas panto.
It was. I was just going to say that. I was just going to say the Christmas panto.
Right.
But Saskatchewan continues to surprise me, being an outsider. We talk about musicians from here, dancers from here, and writers. I don't know if I can name it. I don't know what it is about the prairies, but there's something incredible here. It's either in the water or something about the prairies really inspires people.
Because it's so darn cold 9 months of the year, nobody wants to go outside, so everybody stays in and gets creative.
You have to get creative of things to do.
Right.
But I don't know what it is, and it's funny because I go back to BC and people are like, oh, how is it living in Saskatchewan? It's all farmers and whatever. But I think people discredit Saskatchewan and the other prairie provinces for what they have to offer culturally sometimes.
Well, those farmers have stories which largely influence the topics authors in Saskatchewan write about. Our landscape couldn't vary more from top to bottom of the province, and so the geography influences it. We have a history of hardship through some very, very trying times in the Depression and climate and all of that, which makes Saskatchewanians hardy stock.
That's right. That's
and
right.
all of that influences the writing, I think. But it is astounding how many authors are in this province.
Absolutely. And even transplants, we've had a number of authors come in from other provinces that say, oh, I was born here, or I grew up here, moved away when I went to university, or, so there's something special here.
Do you have a mandate within the authors that you choose every year to have the majority of them be from Saskatchewan, or is it just
nothing's written in stone? We are the Saskatchewan Festival of Words, so we always want to have good representation from Saskatchewan, and there never seems to be a problem finding authors from Saskatchewan that are publish it, that have something new published, you know, to present at the festival. So we're lucky. We're lucky in that sense. We never have a shortage of Saskatchewan authors to bring here, but we always want good Saskatchewan representation at our festival. We have attendees that come in from out of province or from remote areas of the province that want to hear authors from here or learn about authors from here as well. So,
have you yourself started to put pen to paper? Has any of this rubbed off on you?
Not that I would admit to.
Okay.
My father said there's only enough room for one writer in the house, so in the family. So
Okay, right. And this is, how many years have you been involved?
my first festival was 2010.
Okay,
Yes.
so you've got 4 years under your belt. Well, this will be your fifth
This
year.
will be my fifth.
And can you think within that time frame, is there one particular visit from one particular author? I know that's really challenging you.
That is hard, but actually, as soon as you said it, one popped into my mind, and I think it's because in 2010 was my first year at the festival. I was so excited, and I'm so excited every year, but that was sort of the first year I was really excited, and Lorna Crozier was here, and I was always a big fan of Lorna Crozier's, and so working for the festival, she came up and asked me, directions for something. So I acted really cool and was like, oh yeah, you just go down the hall, and told her. And as soon as she was out of sight, I looked at our interns and kind of waved my hands and jumped excitedly, like, oh, I just got to talk to Lorna, and they were looking at me like I was crazy, but I was really excited to have Lorna here, and of course she has Saskatchewan roots, and hopefully we'll have her back. But every year, the thing that surprises me is before every festival, I kind of have my eye on a few authors that I'm really excited about. But it always turns out being someone else that I'm really excited about at the end of the festival, because I've had a chance to talk to them or learn something about them or look at their writing in a different way through meeting them, So, I always have an idea at the beginning and it's totally different in the end, so.
You mentioned interns. They're volunteer interns.
No, they're paid.
They're paid interns.
They're paid interns.
Wow, great, because that's such a hot button topic, isn't it?
That's right. We pay our interns.
Right.
We apply for funding through SaskSport and Service Canada. We have 2 to 3 interns every summer. We do have to pay a portion of it, but there is some government funding that comes through to fund our interns. So they usually start after the May long weekend and work for us all the way through to the end of July.
All right.
Yes.
But you do have a lot of volunteers involved in this festival.
We have over 100 volunteers that work with us year round, and they do everything from taking tickets at events to driving shuttle vans to the airport to pick up authors, to looking after all of the food in our nutrition area at the festival, which is free to festival attendees and authors. So, talking about up close and personal, a lot of times in between sessions, people are going down, having some munchies, buying some books, and the authors are kind of hanging out, eating cheese and crackers and talking to people. So, the volunteers are the lifeblood of our organization. We couldn't do it without them, and they're always just a phone call away, willing to do anything for us, including our board of directors.
Yeah. Donna had mentioned that there is definitely a significant impact in this town as far as local businesses are concerned when the festival rolls into town,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people are, a lot of people, I think, make a vacation out of it.
Yeah.
People laugh at me that aren't from here when I say Moose Jaw is a tourist destination. People in Saskatchewan understand that. It is. We've got the hot springs pool here at the spa. We've got the tunnels. We've got great shopping. We've got the Grant Hall Hotel, which has all just been redone, and it's beautiful. Moose Jaw has a lot to offer. So people are here, they're staying in local hotels, they're attending the festival, going on tours for different things, they're shopping, they're eating here, they're spending money here. So I think the Saskatchewan Festival of Words contributes to Moose Jaw's economy for sure.
Yeah. And I'm sure that the Business Association of Moose Jaw is grateful for a festival like this to roll into
Yes,
town.
we have a number of business sponsors every year, and that take out advertising with us, and we hope that the local businesses see value in what we do for sure.
Right. Am I correct in saying that next year will be the 20th?
Yes,
year?
2016.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So we're already.
Yes, I'm sure.
2015 isn't even finished
Yeah.
being planned yet, but we are keeping our eyes on 2016. So
Are you
we're
typically
hoping.
working just a year and a bit more ahead?
You
Or
know,
is it
well,
just because of 20th?
usually a little bit. The 20th we are starting a little bit early because it's the 20th anniversary in 2016. But normally on the last day of the festival, we like to announce a few authors who are booked for the next year already. So, by the time our festival comes around, we'll have already booked a handful of authors for the following year, so we can tell our audiences on the final day of the festival and get them excited about the new one coming up. Yeah.
So no plans to go back to banking?
Never. No. No, I've said that. I've said that before. No, if for some reason I had to leave the festival, I would probably still stay in the same sector at least. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty addictive once
It
you get
is.
into this arts and culture.
It is.
sector.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you both very much for sharing the experience of this festival, which is wonderful and a very, very important part of our Canadian culture and our Saskatchewan culture. And thank you, Donna, for all of the work that you put into this. It's obvious that you have a love of the written word, and that's what drives you to come into this office every morning.
It does. Also, the opportunity to showcase my hometown of Moose Jaw. We're known as Canada's friendly city, and I think that's in large part why it's the ideal community to host Saskatchewan's festival, literary festival.
And Sarah, thank you for reminding us that there are jobs that fuel one's need to get up out of bed every day, and it sounds like you found the ideal one for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really satisfying. Not just because I love it, but part of the reason I love it is that it's a nonprofit, it's a charitable organization, and to feel like you're making a difference and doing something important is satisfying for me. So yeah, it's great.
I wish you both and Moose Jaw a fantastic Festival 2015 and beyond.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin. We invite people to check us out at our Festival of Words website, festivalofwords.com.
Festivalofwords.com, right.
And they can see the full presenter lineup there and read about the CineView film series and the Performance Cafe open mic as well.
And your Twitter handle is?
At Festival of Words.
And I'm almost willing to bet you're on Facebook as well.
You bet. Saskatchewan Festival of Words on Facebook.
All right. Well, we can find you all there. Great. Wonderful to talk with you both.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Did you know that full versions of SaskScapes can be downloaded or streamed for free from the iTunes Store, Stitcher Radio, and on SoundCloud? Feel free to leave us a review or star rating. And now, back to the podcast.
So as if by magic, I've been transported from Moose Jaw to Saskatoon in a heartbeat. And here I am in Saskatoon, sitting in the beautiful living room of Saskatchewan and Canadian author Anthony Bidulka. Welcome.
Thank you, Kevin. Happy to be here with you.
Nice to finally meet you on a snowy January afternoon.
What do you suspect? It's Saskatchewan.
I've just finished a conversation with Donna and Sarah in Moose Jaw about the fabulous Saskatchewan Festival of Words. You are a frequent guest there, a much-loved guest there, I'm told, and so you seem to be a logical choice for someone to talk to about the importance of that festival to you as an author. I wonder how valuable it is for you to be face-to-face with your audience, how important that is to you in a time when we're all thumbs and texting and 140 characters and accessing books by electronic means, there's a component of this that seems to me to be very old school as far as getting up close and personal and doing readings and taking questions and answers. Can you speak to that as far as how you feel?
It's an interesting thing to talk about because it is kind of old school, but it's new school. Being in front of people, being in front of readers has always been important. And, and I've now been doing this for 15 years or so, but it has changed so dramatically how, I will promote a book. And it used to be that, when my first book came out in like 2003, say, I would immediately start going on book tour throughout Canada, throughout the United States, getting myself in front of people, getting myself in front of readers.
Yeah.
And the other day I was actually looking at one of my early tours, and I would say that probably 80 to 90% of those bookstores no longer exist.
Right.
And probably the same percentage of magazines or newspapers that would have reviewed my books no longer exist. So suddenly what was old school, getting in front of people and being able to do it at something like the Saskatchewan Festival of Words becomes so much more important. And the opportunities to do it, there are so few of them today.
Right.
So, when you look at the market for, who are those people that attend that festival? You're not talking about just people from Moose Jaw. You're not talking about just people from the nearby cities of Saskatoon and Regina. You're not even just talking about people from Saskatchewan. There have been times when I've met people at that festival who are from all over Canada, and they actually plan their vacations, usually road trips, to coincide with the festival, so they know they're going to be in Moose Jaw for that weekend. Mm-hmm. So for me, as a writer who now has many fewer opportunities to travel out into the world to see people, to go to that one location for a weekend and have all these readers in front of me it's incredible. So it's a very important festival.
Right. Do you feel in general that Moose Jaw holds its own against some of the other festivals that you've attended in Canada or other parts of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been to a lot of festivals, as you say, throughout Canada and the United States. I think what makes the Saskatchewan Festival of Words stand out is that it has a very unique character to it. There's something to be said about having a festival that, not only has the history it has and the success it has, but as you arrive into what's a relatively small prairie city that very few people know about, and then have this explosion of literary talent in front of you, that's very exciting. I think what happens with a lot of the other conferences that I would go to, so for instance, I write mysteries and thrillers predominantly. Sure. Many of the conferences that I go to are very focused on that genre. What I love about this festival is that I'm sitting on panels with poets and people who write for magazines, people who are self-published, people who are traditionally published, people who write romance novels, people who write mysteries and thrillers, everything. And it's an exciting environment to be in.
Right. And for you as an author, are there other authors, poets, writers that you are meeting there that you have always wanted to meet? I mean, what's the exchange like between the people who are writing? What does that feel like for you?
I think there's two parts to that. There are those moments of, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to meet Margaret Atwood or Gail Bowen or something like that. Yeah. But then there's also the great discovery. And there is an evening every year at this festival where just us writers go out for, some Chinese food, a couple of drinks, and sit around a table. And I remember just this past summer, I was sitting next to someone who is quite well known in the world of writing, basically creating comic books or anime. And, I know no one who does that. Mm-hmm. And so she and I just had this amazing conversation. I learned about her world. She learned about mine. And, we created 2 new fans, for each other. And that's a pretty dynamic situation to be in.
Right. And do you talk about your writing schedules, your writing habits? I mean, what do writers talk about when you get together as far as the technical aspects of writing or the lifestyle of being an author?
Yeah. I think it's more the latter than the former. It becomes more about the lifestyle. And, one of the things, Kevin, that I always say to new writers when they come to me and they ask for advice and they say, like, what should I do? The very first thing I tell them is to get involved in the writing community, meet other writers. It's like anything else. You want to find people like you. And when you do, even if there's no great problem solving happening, just knowing that there's other people who are going through the same things you are, have the same dreams and hopes and same despairs and highs and lows, there's something very helpful about that. And I think you can't go away from a situation like that. You can't leave the weekend in Moose Jaw Festival of Words without feeling uplifted as a writer, because you have this commonality with this wide group of people, and it really doesn't matter what genre you write in. It's all about living that creative life and following this passion that has to do with words.
And it's a very solitary life you lead when you are writing, yeah? I mean, you're largely in a room at a desk by yourself, I would imagine. So that must feel wonderful to sort of break out of that pattern and be a social butterfly for a while. Although I know that you are in your life anyway.
I think that's a question that you would get different answers from different writers. I know of writers who really struggle with that they see the life of being a writer as, I just want to be in my office in front of my computer or in front of my piece of paper, and I want to create. Yeah. And the fact that not now, I think always, there has been a business perspective to this as a career, if you want to make it a career. And that has to do with being in front of people. And that doesn't come easy for everyone. But fortunately, I love it. To me, it's been one of the great side benefits of this career that I don't think I really even understood when I first started. I didn't know how wonderful it was going to be to go out and stand in a room where people actually come out to see you, and they really care about maybe not necessarily you, but the characters that you created or the stories that you wrote. And I find that really exciting, and it never fails to amaze me when, and I'll be someplace like, Dallas, Texas, to think that, as I'm landing in my plane, thinking there are people down there in this city that I've never been to before who know me, who've read my books, and are going to, leave their jobs and have supper and make a point out of getting in their cars and coming to the bookstore and visiting with me. I think that's wonderful, and I am always so excited at that point. So I'm very happy always to talk to people till, I'm blue in the face, and I think usually they kind of want to get away from me.
Well, that's good. There's a young people's component to the Saskatchewan Festival of Words as well. When you've been there, your most recent visit was 2014. Mm-hmm. When you've been there, have you had the opportunity to just have a Q&A or a chat with specific groups of young people? What's your feeling on young people's aspiring to write? We're overexposed. We're living in a world of reality television, and stuff is instant, and you can be on the internet, and if you don't like what you're watching after 5 seconds, you click and move on to something else. We're getting our life in sound bites. What's it like to for a young person to sort of pull back from all of that and go old school and put pen to paper and create and express?
Yeah. I think it is a worry, and I think what we as writers who have been around for a little while is that we have to realize that old school maybe doesn't work anymore, but there's this new school that can work, and we need to sort of, I think, approach young writers in a different way, mm-hmm. and talk about writing in a different way. But quick story I want to tell you is. A couple of years ago, I was doing a festival in Calgary. And now the books that I write aren't necessarily directed towards young people. So I don't necessarily always have the, 14 to 18-year-olds in my sign-up lines or at my events. But this was an interesting festival in that there was, I think, 4 of us who were kind of the headliners for different genres. And there is a writer who she writes kind of fantasy novels for young people. And then 2 or 3 of us from other genres. And not so much me, but there was, 1 or 2 people who were, they were kind of powerful writers. But we went to a library in Calgary and we all, sat down in front of our table to do our signings. And this woman who wrote for young audiences, her line went out the door and it seemed endless. And long after the 3 of us were kind of done and twiddling our thumbs, she was still signing. And that lineup was made up of, kids and, from 14 to 18 years old. And it did my heart so much good to see that, because those are readers. Those are people who care about reading, and probably a lot of them who care about the process of writing. And that showed me something that up until that point, I wasn't sure. I was kind of thinking along the same lines of what you were just describing, that there's a subtle shift here and it's not a good thing. But I think there is. I think there are a lot of young people who still want to read and want to write. The way they think about it and the way they're going to approach it is going to be different than you or I might have. In the time period that I have been a writer, which is a fairly, we're talking about contemporary times, this industry has always been in tumult in one way or another. And it's either been, predatory pricing between the US and Canada. It's been, the beginning of ebooks. It's been the big box retailers taking over book selling. How we write our books, how we sell our books, how we read our books, everything has changed so dramatically in a very short period of time. I just expect change. And a couple of years ago, I used to do a talk about marketing yourself as a writer. And one of the things I would always say is that you have to have this tool chest of tools that you need to bring out to market yourself. Now, what works today may not work tomorrow, and you need to always reevaluate. So if, early in my career, going out on tour and visiting small bookstores was amazing for me, it doesn't work anymore. And I've had to change. Change is good, and, you just have to roll with it.
Right. But again, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, that's what's so wonderful about this festival, is that it gives you the opportunity to go back to that style of one-on-one with your audience. You've been asked 8 gazillion questions, I imagine, in your career as a writer, both by your audience and by interviewers. This may put you on the spot, but are there questions that have taken you by surprise in a good way with your audience when you've been in a festival situation?
What has taken me by surprise is how personal people will get about the characters that I write about. And that has raised a real important question for me, which is, especially when you write series novels, as I do, because what someone tells you at an event like the Saskatchewan Festival of Words or at a book signing, what people tell you or ask you about or suggest about a character, I mean, you really could, affect that in that character's life going forward. I mean, I'm always writing another book. Right. And if someone says, I think that guy should get his hair cut, I can cut their hair. But it tends to be much more serious things than that. And the question that it's raised for me is, who am I writing for? And I needed to think about, do I need to give serious consideration to what my readers are asking for, quite plainly asking for? Or do I stay true to what my vision has been? And I'm always a writer that I think ahead of time. I think about my characters and where I want them to go and where I see them in the future. A lot of the specifics may not be there, but I know where these people are going. So if a person in the audience says, no, you need to do this, it gives me pause. And the example I'll give you is about, my main character, my mystery series, Russell Quant. Mm-hmm. Readers were very adamant that they wanted that character to have a solid romantic relationship.
Right.
And that took me by surprise. What I was trying to do as a writer is when I first started that series, I had a number of friends who were in their mid-30s and had made conscious decisions not to be in relationships. Mm-hmm. And I thought, that's a valid life choice. I hadn't thought about that. And from a writer's perspective, I thought that's interesting to investigate. And that's what I wanted to do with Russell Quant. I wanted to show that it's okay to be in your mid-30s and, have a great career, have lots of friends. It's not like he didn't have, outlets for being intimate with people. He just didn't want to be in a relationship. Many readers wanted him very badly to be in a relationship. And it took me finally realizing that this was such a wonderful thing because these readers cared so much about this character that they just wanted him to be happy. And their definition of being happy is being in a solid, loving relationship.
That's interesting.
Yes. And I had to think long and hard about that. In the end, I did not respond right away. I kept on going down the path that I felt I wanted to put this character. But the joy of having a long-running series is that by, about book 6 or 7, I started thinking, now I think I do want to investigate, can this character be in a relationship? And I swear to you that I think at least twice I wrote a character for him to fall in love with, and I fully intended for this to be his long-term relationship. And by the time I went to write the next book, they'd broken up. Somewhere between the end of the last book and the beginning of this one, they did it on their own. I just could not make that relationship work. But I love that as a writer because, that's life, right? Like sometimes the relationships you really want to work, they just don't work.
I love that you're talking about that and you truly didn't know. It's as if there's a life that you have no control over in a way, even though you are the author. Yeah. You're at the helm.
Yeah. And it's something that I learned about from, another Saskatchewan mystery writer, Gail Bowen.
Right.
And this is before I knew Gail, and I, loved her books. And I remember this experience of, and she writes series, and I, read one book, and then some, months later, I started reading the next one. And as I'm reading this book, I'm going, but, wait a second, like, how come this is going on? And I convinced myself that I must have missed a book between the other two because things were happening that weren't talked about in the prior books. I thought I missed something. And when eventually I met Gail and asked her about that, she said, well, just because you're not writing about it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Right. And I love that idea is that these characters still have lives in between the books that we write.
Right.
And I've always thought about my characters in that way. And I, once you give them that freedom, it's a pretty exciting writing process.
Your characters have lives in between the books that you write. Their lives keep on going.
Yeah.
That's as profound as when I tell singers you have to sing through the pauses.
Yes.
You have to act through the pauses. Wow. That'll give me a meal to feast on for a while.
Yeah, think about that.
Right. It has been said about the Saskatchewan Festival of Words that it takes place in a city, in a province that's highly unlikely that such a festival should happen. Do you find it odd that we should have such a wonderful and recognizable festival in this province? Do we hold our own in the literary scene now?
I do not find it odd for even a second. Uh-huh. And the reason is because, I live the same kind of life as that festival does, where people think like, how can there be that, incredible festival in this little city that no one's heard about?
Yeah.
over my entire career, I've heard those people who have said, how can you write a book about a detective in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan,
Right.
and think you're going to be successful?
Yes.
And I will admit that there is pressure put on writers such as myself, and I think even Canadian writers in general, that we should write to the market. And for us in Canada, the market numbers wise is the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a numbers game. We need to be in that market. And the wisdom, so to speak, has always been that you need to write about the market where you want to sell your books.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that as long as you write a good story, they will read about it. The key for us, I think, is marketing. We have to make sure that we show up in those markets.
Right.
And I think the Saskatchewan Festival of Words has approached it the same way, where when I was at the festival this past summer, there was writers from across Canada. There was readers and attendees from across Canada and the United States. They haven't said, we're a Moose Jaw Festival and we'll just try and get Moose Jaw writers. They've opened themselves up to the world. And the one, terrific thing of many terrific things about Saskatchewan is that we have learned that we are not the center of the world,
Mm-hmm.
that we need to reach out and that we need to bring things to us. And it's made us a richer environment. And I think someone said the other day to me that they like to describe Saskatchewan as being in the middle of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And if you have that mindset, the restrictions are gone. All we have to do is get on an airplane to get wherever we want to do. And the same can be said in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
I have found with my books that writing about Saskatchewan, instead of being a challenge, it has really been a boon to me. Because in this day and age where the world is so small, because of the internet and because of technology and because of jet travel, everyone has been to Paris or knows somebody who lives in Rome or has vacationed in Mexico or, the world is small. People just have to Google image any place to see it.
Mm-hmm.
To have a festival in a city that pretty much no one has heard about, to write a book based in a city that pretty much no one has heard about, that's an opportunity.
Yeah.
It gets people excited.
Sure.
And I'm sure that the people with the festival have told you what great response they get from authors who come in and go like, we had no idea.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
I don't envy their job of having to select who comes.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously they're doing something right,
Yeah.
because the number of people who want to be here, they can't have everybody. So that's exactly what you want in a festival.
Yeah.
Why in the world are we littered with writers in this province? This is a very prolific province. Why do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One is that there is a benefit to having some remoteness. I think that for writers, we sit here and we can be inspired, and we have people surrounding us that have brought the world to us. It's pretty difficult, Kevin, I think, to meet anyone on the street in any city or town in Saskatchewan who hasn't travel outside of these borders.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's one of the things is that, we have long, cold winters, and so we sometimes need to get away.
Right.
But the benefit of that is that, as travel just expands your horizons.
Yeah.
So all these people come back, and what do? They bring that culture back with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in turn, starts inspiring poets and writers. And, for myself, the one series that I write, there's a lot of travel in there. And why? Because I travel.
Yeah.
But, I also balance it with a very strong sense of Saskatchewan. And so I think that's one reason. I think another reason is that there's a unique mentality in Saskatchewan of people helping each other and being supportive of one another. When I have a book launch in Saskatoon and I tell my colleagues around the world about these book launches, they are in shock of how big these events are.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I'll have, my little event in McNally Robinson and hundreds of people come out.
Yeah.
And, my colleagues can't believe that happens in a city this size. And I think that's just a good example of how supportive a city like this is.
Right.
And I think we see that in villages and towns and cities across this province for everything, not just writers. It's just, it's a mentality of Saskatchewan people.
You talked about making the choice to base your writing in Saskatchewan, and certainly have that as the focus. When you started the long running Russell Quant series, you made also a pretty bold choice to have him be a gay character. The world of gay mystery writing is growing, yes, but at the time that you made that choice and put pen to paper with book number 1, that probably wasn't the case, and certainly not in Canada. I think I've heard you speak about that, that you may have been, in fact, the first, and likely are the first person. Was there fear and trepidation behind making that choice, or was that just extremely comfortable with you?
No fear, very little trepidation, and maybe stupidly so, I don't know. But for me, it was more a matter of survival in a way, where when I was starting out, I was very cognizant of the fact of how small I was, where I was a nobody writer. I had never written or published anything, Kevin, not even, a newspaper article. I was an accountant and here I am wanting to be a writer. I was very aware of the business world and I knew about competition. And I would walk into bookstores and libraries and look at those shelves and think, oh my goodness, how am I, this nobody, unknown, untested writer living in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, how am I going to get a book on one of those shelves? And not just a book on the shelf. For me, it was about more than that. I wanted people to read this book. I didn't want to write a book and have, 12 copies sold, mostly to my mother.
Right.
I wanted to build a career.
Sure.
And I began thinking about a lot of the lessons that I learned from the business world. And one is that you need to find a way to stand out. Mm-hmm. And I thought about what type of book could I write that hadn't been seen in Canada yet, that, might be seen as controversial in some circles, but controversy isn't a bad thing.
Right.
And yet also served me as a writer, that I felt there was an important story to tell, and the fact that there weren't any gay detectives being written about in Canada, that there was a niche that needed to be filled. Yeah. And for myself personally, I thought this is an important thing to start in this country. Yeah. And so I put all that together. I smushed it all together and created this story and this character. And my very first book launch in Saskatoon was, this massive party and this celebration. And that just pumped me up. And I just, I went to my publisher and I said, okay, let's go. And it wasn't until I was actually in the process of going where some of the trepidation might have come in, thinking like, oh, wait a second, like maybe not everybody's going to like the fact that there's this gay character. And and I'm sure I would have had, a time or two where I would have been landing in some city thinking, I wonder if there's going to be like protesters or is there going to be somebody in the audience who's going to throw an egg at me, or what is it?
Right.
And yet I still held on to the fact that, there was so much power of, from the love and support that I had in this community. It really drove me. I thought that what I had done was something that needed to be done. I was confident in the book, and I just went forward. And I was quite cognizant of the fact that I thought this is going to be the thing that is going to make me stand out. And if there are, issues or what have you, this is going to be the thing. And I've told the story a couple of times where one of my first big literary conferences, same type of thing as what happens at the Saskatchewan Festival of Words. You have this panel and you stand up and people ask questions. And this was somewhere in the deep south of the United States. And the very first question of the evening was for me, and there's this big guy, and he comes up to the mic from the back of the room, and he says, "Mr. Bidulka, I just want to know how you thought that you could write a book and be popular writing about a character who's from Saskatchewan." And, I so thought the end of that sentence was going to be, how could you write and be successful writing about a character who's gay?
Right.
And that has continued throughout my career. The thing that has been the defining aspect of that series, the questions that I get most often have to do with the fact that this character is from Saskatchewan, not having to do with the fact that he's gay. And I think it's because, we're blessed to live in a day where that's so much less an issue. More people tend to, have a brother, an uncle, or a niece who are, from the LGBT community. Yeah. But very few people know anybody from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So that's the thing that's curious to them. And they, and sometimes people ask me if I'm offended when people ask me questions like this, but people have said to me, so, do you live in an igloo? Are there polar bears in your city? Questions like that. I never take offense to that. Mm-hmm. I'm there to educate and to spread the word and to show them, here's what life is like in a place called Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. What a great opportunity for a writer. It's exciting to me that happens.
So you talked about the fact that you were an accountant. So there you are, you're a kid. I'm gonna do a 10-second overview of your life. This is your life. Here you are, you're a kid, you find a box of books in a storage room of your parents. You start reading, you're hooked. You start writing your first series, the animal world that you're writing about.
Look at you. This is my life.
Yeah, and then you use your guinea pig niece Kim. Right. And so you're already there, and in childhood you're already being bitten by the writing bug. And then something happens and you go, however, I think I should do something sensible. And after all these interesting careers like selling shoes and bartending, and what exactly is a bull cook in a Ukrainian mine? What?
Uranium mine.
Uranium mine.
A Ukrainian mine. Wow.
Uranium
I'd like to go there.
What's a bull cook?
A bull cook is someone who basically does all of the odd jobs around the mine. So I would have been the dishwasher, the pot scrubber, the bathroom cleaner. He was like a floater around the mine. It was a summer job.
Uranium mine.
Yeah.
Oh, there aren't less mines.
I think yours is much more interesting, though.
A Ukrainian mine. There you go. You can put that in your next book. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yes, we dig up sausage and pierogies,
Right. Well, I should say happy belated New Year's.
Yes.
Right.
Well, you have a lot of great facts, but
that
one not quite.
Oh, all right. Okay. But then you did ultimately end up settling on being an accountant.
Yeah, a chartered accountant.
A chartered accountant. Mm-hmm. And during that, I think I already know the answer to my question, but you don't strike me as the kind of person that when you did decide to break free of that and write, that you weren't escaping something that was stifling, non-creative, that was just robbing you of your soul. Somehow I think you actually enjoyed doing that, and that you brought a lot of that life to your writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't running away, I was running towards. And you're right. I mean, people often ask me the question about, do I regret the fact that I, spent the first, 20 years of my adulthood doing these other jobs and, then spending a decade as a chartered accountant. It's quite the opposite. Those careers and those experiences have fed me. I think they've made me more successful as a writer. There is a strong business component of being a writer. Mm-hmm. And I know how to read royalty statements. Mm-hmm. I know how to market. I know about, the business world, and it's important. I think just the people and experiences that I had doing all those jobs in the Ukrainian mine and
I'm not going to let that.
oh no, I may even write about that. But those were inspirational times for me. For me, that move was knowing that the time was right at that point in my life to pursue passion.
Right.
And I think that's important to give yourself that opportunity at least once. And to be clear, Kevin, I didn't necessarily need to have published a book or to have made a lot of money or to have sold a lot of books or any of that originally. It was about trying and having that time in my life where I allowed myself to try. It's turned out wonderfully, but the original move was just about giving myself that gift. It's a dramatic thing to do. I don't necessarily recommend it to anyone.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
What I say to people about that, because it's sometimes when I tell this story, people say, well, I can't do that. I can't just quit my job and become a singer the next day. Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way it happened for me, isn't necessarily the way it's going to happen for anyone, and probably it won't. For me, the important lesson was the idea of recognizing what your passion is and finding a way to make it part of your life. And in my case, it was a dramatic gesture, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be deciding that, once you've recognized what that passion is, find a way to bring it into your life, make it a hobby, make it part of your volunteer work, make it that thing that you do on, Saturday afternoons when everyone else is off, doing grocery shopping. That, I think, is the important message. Doing what I'm doing today, I mean, I still, 15 years after starting this, I wake up every morning just overjoyed that this is what I do.
Yeah. I'd love to have you back as a guest in a future episode. I could talk to you for much longer. I've got
scats of things to talk about. This is fun.
But thank you. I'm happy to have your input on the festival, and I know the festival is thrilled every time that you're there. I think we all agree that anybody listening who isn't from Saskatchewan, who's never been here, ought to put it on their bucket list to come here because there's a lot to do and there's a lot to see all over the province.
Yep, you will be awed.
Yeah, you will. From top to bottom, the geography is quite stunning in and of itself. But that little weekend in July...
There's something magical about it.
So get there.
Yes, indeed.
Right. Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for listening. The SaskScapes podcast is created and hosted by Kevin Power for Sask Culture. Funding to the cultural sector is provided through the Saskatchewan Lotteries Trust Fund for Sport, Culture, and Recreation. For more information, visit iheartculture.ca and saskculture.ca. Music for SaskScapes is provided by Saskatchewan-born singer-songwriter Jeffrey Straker. There's no end to the stories to be told. So, until next time...